Hello and welcome back to MX vs. ATV Legends. Now, today I want to talk about something that I've seen popping up pretty much whenever I post an MX vs. ATV Legends either video or short. Now, what I notice is that there's always sort of a mixed response to this game. And when I say mixed response, I mean particularly in the comments, it's either people saying, oh, I really enjoy this game and I would like to see more, or it's the complete opposite end of the spectrum of people saying, and this is an actual comment that I got on one of my MX vs. ATV Legends videos, this game is dog water. That was the actual quote. That was the actual comment. And I've gotten a lot of other comments whenever I've posted videos on this game, not necessarily negative comments on the videos themselves or the content itself, but negative comments towards the game itself, like this game is awful, the physics are unrealistic, or this game is unrealistic, why would you play it, yada 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 yada. And I think right out of the gate, we need to clear up one thing, and that is talking about realism. MX vs. ATV is not a simulator. This series has never been about, hyper-realistic simulation. I started on this series back in the PS2 days with MX vs. ATV Unleashed, which I still believe to be one of the greatest games I've ever played, especially in terms of hours I've put into a game. Now, a lot of us joined the series with MX vs. ATV Unleashed, and Legends is not on the level of Unleashed. I'm going to go ahead and say that right now. Unleashed was from a time in gaming where they pushed that game so hard. They pushed that game as far as they could, I think, for the hardware at the time, and they really ended up with a product that was leaps and bounds ahead of just about anything else in its category. Now, the reason why I think Legends gets compared so much to other quote-unquote realistic games is because now we have a lot of different games that are kind of competing for that spot of realistic MX and Supercross style gameplay, and I think that that's where a lot of that, I wouldn't call it necessarily like hate towards this game is coming from, but where I think a lot of the criticism is coming from. I think part of it is coming from that, and I think the other part of it is coming from MX vs. ATV fans that are a little bit, older, that did play the game during the days of, or play the series during the days of games like Unleashed, that we'll play a game like this today and go, where are the dynamics back from the days of Unleashed? Like, I miss those dynamics. And I feel that. I'm with you on that. I miss them too. But what that does bring me on to is the point of how I don't believe that this game is awful, bad, and terrible. Now, do I believe is this the greatest game ever, or the greatest game in the series? No, definitely not. But I certainly, once again, don't think that it's awful and terrible and not fun and, not worth buying. I do still think it's a very fun game. Do I think that there are things that could be improved, fixed, made better? Absolutely I do. But I think that you're going to have that in almost any series, especially in any series that's been long-running. And the reason I bring up long-running series is that leads me into my next point, and I think this is very important. Now, as somebody that has been around the gaming space for a really long time now, I mean, I started gaming back in probably 1999-ish, I want to say, roundabout there, give or take. And one of the series that I played a lot, especially growing up, was Need for Speed. My first Need for Speed was Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, the original one, Need for Speed 3, which I believe released, if I am not mistaken here, I believe it was 1998, I think, was Need for Speed 3. Don't quote me on that. It was either 98 or 99, somewhere around there. But either way, one of the things that I notice is with a lot of these long-running series, you'll have a couple of really well-received hit games, like, for example, take Need for Speed Underground or Need for Speed Underground 2. However, what you run into is in a series that runs this long, like, for example, Need for Speed or MX vs. ATV, in MX vs. ATV's case, you have MX vs. ATV Unleashed, which was, for a lot of people, that was the height of the series, and so now that ends up becoming the standard to which people kind of compare the rest of the series to. And I don't necessarily think that that's healthy, because it doesn't allow the series to try anything new, it doesn't allow the series to progress, because we've seen this with series like Need for Speed, where every time a Need for Speed game gets announced, every single time, you know, the entire comment section on the trailer, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or wherever the case may be, the entire, well, maybe not the entire comment section, but a lot of the comment section is, oh, well, this is automatically going to be terrible because it's not Underground 3, or this is automatically going to be terrible because it's not a remake of Most Wanted 05. And I see that over here in the MX vs. ATV space where, you know, it's basically a lot of people going, well, this is automatically terrible now because it's not just a remake of Unleashed. It's not next-gen Unleashed. It's not everything that Unleashed had just released as a next-gen game. Now, I'm not saying that we don't need to hold developers to certain standards for their games. I mean, obviously, we want the series to improve. We want the games to improve. We want the gameplay to improve. We want the series to move forward. But at the same time, I think holding developers to such a tight box of what you expect from them is essentially like, that's how you, wow, I cased that jump really bad, but that's how you don't let a series grow. Because if all you ever want is to see, you know, an older game in the series get rehashed over and over and over again, the series never makes any progress. But at the same time, what I find happens is you get into this weird loop where you'll have players that are like, well, we want this old game remade, and developers are like, well, we're not going to do that, we're going to make this game instead, and then you end up with players that are just like, oh, well, I wanted this old game, so the new game is automatically crap to me now. And so you end up in this weird kind of loop of people that want the old game remade and aren't willing to give a new game a chance, and then that in turn does not help, you know, good new games come out in the series. Now, I'm not saying that that's entirely the reason why, but at the same time, I feel like it certainly doesn't help. And really what this brings me to is, after seeing so many comments every time that I have posted a MX vs. ATV Legends video, you know, saying like, or essentially seeing this, you know, kind of polarizing difference between the comments I see, either like, oh yeah, this game is fun, I enjoy it, or, oh my god, this is terrible, why would you even post this, this game is awful. To those of you that are in the camp of, you know, this game is awful, why would you play it, why would you post it, nobody should buy it, what would you like to see this series do? Is it that you want more realistic physics? Is it that you want the series to return to more of a MX vs. ATV Unleashed type format? Or is it something else entirely? Because, you know, after seeing so many comments from that angle, I really want to legitimately do some research and figure it out, because I think this game is fun. I don't necessarily think it's the best game in its class. I don't necessarily think it's realistic at all, but I do think it's fun, and I do think it provides an experience that has kept me entertained for decent lengths of time. So I would say I kind of fall somewhat in the middle. Would I like to see a return to kind of the Unleashed style format for the MX vs. ATV games? Sure, I grew up on that. You know, I loved MX vs. ATV Unleashed. But at the same time, you know, do I think that the only game they should be making is, you know, a next-gen remaster of Unleashed every year? No, because the games would never advance. They would never get better. They would never offer something new. And so, while, yes, I think a lot of us have really fond memories of games like Unleashed, I do think for a series to stay around, and for a series to stay relevant, and for a series to progress, it needs to offer something new. And, you know, I do think they are trying, but at the same time, I feel like the fan base is so split that in a way, maybe they're not quite sure entirely where to go. But, you know, on the other hand, some, you know, I've seen comments out there like, oh, you know, lazy devs, this, that, and the other, you know, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not going to jump on that train either. Terrible case, over the bars, just gruesome, absolutely gruesome. But anyways, back to what we were talking about before, I'm not necessarily going to jump on that train because, again, I've seen, you know, some comments in various videos about this game going after the devs, you know, in particular, like saying, oh, well, they just didn't try, the game's not good, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I legitimately think they want to make a good game, but at the same time, I'm sure there are complications that come with, you know, making a game like this, and especially delivering on what all of the fans want, because obviously MX vs. ATV has tried so many different angles at this point, kind of similarly to the Need for Speed series, where, you know, if you release a game that's going to make one part of the fan base happy, it's almost like, okay, now that you've made this one part of the fan base happy, you've now made this other part of the fan base mad. And that's a really unfortunate situation for any game series to find itself in, because now you have these, you know, you have these sides of the fan base battling with each other. And, you know, let's use Need for Speed again as an example. Let's use everybody's favorite Need for Speed game, the new Most Wanted. That game was enjoyed by so many people. And to be fair, I say that sarcastically, but like, I genuinely enjoyed that game. But I have friends that think that the new Most Wanted was the worst Need for Speed game ever made. You know, think about that comparison. I think it was a fun game. I genuinely enjoyed it. I had some really fun memories with my friends, and I made a lot of videos on it. I genuinely had a good time with the game. You know, was it the Need for Speed formula that we knew from before? No, it was a lot more Burnout-esque, but do I think that that negatively impacted the fun I had with the game? No, I don't. However, I know people that think that it was the worst Need for Speed game ever made. And there's nothing wrong with that opinion. You know, being able to have our opinions and talk about them are what allow these series to grow. But at the same time, you know, I know what it's like to be a fan of a game that in a series, you know, other people thought was terrible. So it's one of those things. It's like you're going to run into it in any long-running series. But this ramble has gone on long enough. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this topic in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you would like to see more ramblings and other topics like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button to turn those notifications on. And I will see y'all in the next one. Talk to y'all later. Hope y'all enjoyed.